Heads located in the lobby, or complete a blue speaker card as available. If you need assistance, please find a South Coast AQMD employee. Speakers may be limited to a total of 3 minutes or less for all agenda items. Times may be shortened to ensure all speakers can be heard. A countdown timer will be displayed on the screen for each public comment. More time will be allotted for Spanish translation that is not simultaneous. For questions or issues on making a public comment, please call the public advisor at 909-396-2432. That's 909-396-2432. Please adhere to the speaker time limit and treat others with courtesy, civility, and respect. Failure to do so can result in your mic being muted or you being removed from the meeting. Be aware that this meeting is being recorded. By participating, you authorize recording of audio and visual content presented during the live event and consent to subsequent use of the recording in the public domain by South Coast AQMD.
This is an audio test for the Hall of Admin. Can you guys hear me?
We hear you.
Thank you.
Hi, Supervisor. We've already done the housekeeping comments. And I believe we're
You
ready.
got a form, you ready to rock and roll?
I believe so. I think Supervisor Perez is on board, as is Mayor McCallum here. And with you, that would make the quorum, but I will leave it to you to call the meeting to order.
All right, thank you very much. I'd like to call the meeting to order. Today's Friday, yay, March 21st, 2025. And this is our hybrid mobile source meeting. And could we go ahead and have staff call roll, please?
Mayor Pro Tem McCallum. Here. Supervisor Perez. Okay. Council Member Rahman. Mayor Pro Tem Rodriguez. Chair Delgado is absent. And then Acting Chair Supervisor Mitchell.
Present.
Supervisor Perez and Rahman, Councilmember Rahman and Mayor Pro Tem Rodriguez should be popping on.
I'm
I'm here now. Good morning.
Rodriguez just joined.
Hello, everyone.
Okay.
Good morning.
We have a
Friday.
Good
quorum.
morning.
Thank
Happy
you.
Friday. So we've got a quorum.
Yes, we have a quorum.
Excellent. Thank you very much. We've got, I'm Vice Chair and our newly appointed Chair, Delgado, is not able to join today. We have two informational items on the agenda. First, item 1 is the update on the proposed Rule 2304 commercial marine ports. And I believe that we have a presentation by staff.
Yes, good morning. Thank you, Vice Chair. We're here to talk about the commercial marine ports and proposed Rule 2304. this is obviously a long history here on our work. Go to slide 2, please. Thank you. I just want to reiterate some of the things that are really of importance here. One is we need emission reductions from port sources, in particular to meet ambient air quality standards for ozone, and then also for particulate matter, PM2.5 as well. Just a little factoid here. We had about 270 tons per day of NOx emissions in 2023. That needs to reduce to 60 tons per day in 2037, and we need reductions along the way. The ports make up a significant fraction of our inventory, 15 to 20% of the basin-wide NOx inventory. So we cannot get to attainment without significant reductions from port sources, among all the other sources as well. One of the things that's really become clear along the way, and there's obviously been a lot of discussion of this, is charging and fueling infrastructure. It's critical. It's a first step that needs to happen to get to the next generation of mobile sources that will be needed to reduce all these emissions. There's a lot of consensus on this point. It's very critical to get to these zero emissions ambitions that the ports themselves have been putting forward. And really, we know that this is not the only step that's needed. There's going to have to be follow-up steps. And it's not just AQMD that's part of this. There's, at the international level, the International Maritime Organization, at the federal level, EPA, at the state level, CARB, all of those entities and others are going to be acting in this space. But this first step is really critical on the infrastructure. Next slide. So here on slide 3, there's a very long history, again, of all the efforts at the ports, a lot of entities involved in this work. A lot of rulemaking occurred in the 1990s and the early 2000s, looking at engine standards, looking at fleet standards, fuel standards. Most of those rules are phased in at this point. They had long phase-in periods. Most of those rules are, if not completely phased in, are very close to phased in. And we've seen remarkable success. We see the emissions that have come down since, the graph shown on the right there from 2005 until present, that emissions have come down across all of the sources. The ports themselves have taken a lot of actions through their clean air action plans, demonstrating a lot of equipment, which really helps to, ensure the equipment is feasible and can be put into use. AQMD has been a part of this the whole way, trying to partner everywhere we can and take a lot of actions to try to encourage this turnover to new equipment. Funding has been a big piece of that, and a lot of other efforts too. We did also look, as part of the 2016 Air Quality Management Plan, tried to develop facility-based measures. At the time, immediately following that, we pursued a Memorandum of Understanding, an MOU. We worked on that for 4 years at least. And unfortunately, at the end of that really just was narrowed down to just really mainly looking at the truck program. And we couldn't come to agreement, mainly held up on the issue of enforceability. And that was just a very limited look. So the board directed staff to pivot, that we gave a good try to an MOU effort, and we pivoted to this rulemaking effort in early 2022. And that's the effort that we're talking about here today. Next slide. So we did update the entire board in early February, the February board meeting. What I'll be presenting here today is the exact same concept. There's no differences in the concept from what was presented to board. It's just an update and to be able to answer more questions if there are any on where we're going with this. One key thing that has happened since that board meeting is we released the preliminary first draft rule language in late February or mid-February, and then in late February, we had a working group meeting to discuss that with stakeholders. So we'll talk a little bit about that here today. We're continuing that outreach, and that will continue after today's committee meeting as well. Next slide. So just a quick refresher, the overall purpose of this is really focusing on infrastructure. That's one of the things we heard from a lot of stakeholders, focus on infrastructure first. So, okay, That's what we'll do. But we're looking at it comprehensively. It's not just trucks. It's not just cargo handling equipment. What's going on with the ocean-going vessels and the alternative marine fuels that are needed there, hovercraft, locomotives, et cetera. So holistically, all in, if the goal is zero emissions, how are we going to get there? The applicability of this really is just the two ports, LA and Long Beach. Next slide. There's four main components to this rule, this proposed rule. It's the ports would need to develop a plan and then submit that plan to us. We would evaluate it and approve it. There'd be a criteria in the rule for that. We would then require the ports to implement that plan and report on the progress of that implementation. And then the last key bit is that we know flexibility is needed. This is a very large effort. We know that there's some uncertainties at the time of plan development and approval, and we built in flexibility to allow for changes, reasonable changes as they come along. The preliminary draft language that is now public, we did have a few spots in there that we had placeholder language, and all of it certainly we're open to stakeholder feedback. But there's a few key parts in there where we highlighted for stakeholders, hey, we want to hear specific input on these pieces as we move forward. Next slide. So going to that first step, the plan submission and approval. One of the things that we built into this first draft language is it's not just, if the board were to adopt this rule, 2 years later, the ports would submit a plan to us, but we want to have check-in points along the way so that there aren't surprises. We aren't surprised, the ports aren't surprised by what we're thinking, we're not surprised by what they're developing. So just have some check-in points along the way. For the plan itself, we do have approval criteria in the rule. This is one of the spots out of that placeholder language seeking feedback. This is one of the spots of what exactly should be in that approval criteria. We have, of course, a number of elements. I'll go through those in a little bit. Is a plan complete? Does it meet the targets? Can it achieve the targets the ports have laid out? But I'll go through that in a little bit. And then finally, there'd be an approval or partial approval or disapproval, and then follow-up steps to get the plan approvable. Next step, next slide. Okay, so what's in the plan itself? Three main pieces here. First are planning targets, and the ports, for example, already have some targets that they've laid out for trucks. They want to get to 100% zero emission drayage trucks by 2035 and 100% zero emission cargo handling equipment by 2030. That's already in the Clean Air Action Plan. Both mayors for LA and Long Beach, the previous administrations, also set out in a declaration in 2017 that those were goals. So the idea that we put forward in the proposed rule is that we've put forward some default targets as an example of saying, okay, well, if these are things the ports have already laid out specifics on, as a default, then that's what they should be planning towards. But they should be developing targets for all of their categories, vessels, locomotives, hovercraft, et cetera, so that they have an endpoint that they're planning towards. But we let the ports develop that themselves. They are the ones guiding that policy on what are the appropriate targets, knowing all of the challenges that are out there and getting this infrastructure in place. Let's lay it all out so everybody can see it. The thing that is certainly a point that's going to come up later is that this rule does not have any targets for use of the infrastructure. It does not have any targets for emission reductions, certainly no cargo caps or anything like that. But this really, the targets are just for installation of infrastructure. But if they have a goal of 100% zero emission cargo handling equipment in 2030, well, that's their goal for the ports, but we're just worried about the infrastructure piece of that. How much infrastructure is needed to hit that goal? But the requirement is only on infrastructure. A number of assessments we know are going to be critical for a plan like this on, what's the energy demand and supply, how much is it going to cost, how do they plan to fund it? We don't expect that all of that will be figured out with the plan, but what are the approaches that they think they're going to take to get the funding for this infrastructure that would meet their own goals? We know that there's potential impacts on the workforce, both on putting the infrastructure in place, but then if there's any automation that is built into the plan, as far as some of this infrastructure, that needs to be laid out, and looking at the importance of human-operated equipment there. And then also, what are any environmental impacts, any CEQA analyses that have been done along the way are going to happen, just to make sure that we're clear on those impacts. Another thing that's really important is to identify milestones along the way. It's one thing to say, okay, there's a goal in 2035, but how do we get to 2035, say for trucks? What are those important milestones along the way so that we can make sure progress is being made? So the ports would lay out what those important milestones are. And then in addition, some of this is within the port's control. Some of it, they need to work with their tenants. Some of it, they need to work with their utilities, others, et cetera. And so the plan would lay out whose role and responsibility is it for each of these milestones and each of these actions that make up the plan itself. And again, the rule would only be applicable to the ports. And so we would only hold the ports responsible for the portions that are within their control. Next slide. Okay, so that blue box is really an important one, that once they have a plan that is approved, the ports need to implement the plan. They said that they have these goals. Okay, there's accountability. They need to actually implement the actions necessary to reach those milestones and planning targets. And that green box, that's really showing just the tracking, the accountability, to make sure that there's reporting along the way, both before the plan is approved, so those interim reports, that there's actions that are already occurring. We're not asking the ports or not expecting the ports to slow down on any infrastructure projects that are currently underway. So we just want to make sure we know what's going on and how that fits into the overall plans. There's those early reports, interim reports, and then once a plan is approved, later progress reports. Next slide. On the flexibility, the way that we've built this in is sort of two main approaches. On the left, you see there that the ports have an ability within the rule language to modify the plan and to lay out a justification for why a modification might be needed, and to set new targets or new milestones if something becomes infeasible. That's a full plan, sort of, portion of a plan or full plan resubmittal approval. That's sort of a longer process because it's maybe a major change that would be needed. On the right, we have something a little bit more streamlined, time extensions. So for example, say there's some deadline that, January 1st, 2029 for some deadline. And maybe there's a utility delay that says, we need another 2 months. Something happened, we need another 2 months. Okay, there's a streamlined way to say, okay, there's a little utility delay or something like that. And that's up to 3 years maximum per request. So it's meant to be more streamlined as opposed to a full plan resubmittal and approval, or a partial plan resubmittal and approval. Next slide. So we've been getting feedback. We're continuing to get feedback. This is the slides. Since these slides were prepared and released, we've gotten more feedback since then. So for example, from the ports, we heard some things in the working group meeting, but we also just received a letter late last night. And they're still asking about, the benefits of rule versus an agreement approach. They did tell us in the working group meeting that there would be some follow-up, and we did receive a letter last night with a number of questions. A lot of this really is looking at what kind of flexibility is there really? There's some uncertainty that's out there right now. So how does that uncertainty fold into a plan, and how can that be accommodated in the plan? They don't want anything that would slow down their progress. They really want to make sure that there's not, inhibitions on the kind of work that they're doing already. Some questions that the ports are asking about jurisdiction, as well as authority. There are some questions about what authority we have and how does a rule like this interact with the port's own jurisdiction. Some questions about incentive funding and, what is the role of incentive funding? And so just, some very brief responses on this. The rule has a lot of flexibility. I talked through a little bit here already, that there is flexibility that is inherently designed in the rule. We also have, just within our rules all rules at AQMD. We have other kinds of flexibility that are built in as well, whether it's through hearing board process, through emergency actions or something like that. But we've built in a lot of extra flexibility here that are really tailored to this specific rule. What we're also looking to do is to keep the ports as the center of the policymaking and the management of port operations. We're not trying to step in on port management and those details. It's really just saying if the ports have a goal, we want to make sure we understand how they're going to get to that goal and then to keep them accountable to the goals that they are setting. And then incentives and enforcement, that's actually what we're really aiming to discuss at the next working group. And so we're hoping to open up some more discussion on that interaction between a rule like this and incentive programs, and just in general, how does enforcement work here at South Coast AQMD? Next slide. For community feedback, we are continuing to get comments from community, including a letter that I think we received 2 days ago. And a lot of consistent themes we're starting to hear from some community members really concerned about pulling emission reduction targets out of this proposed concept. There's a lot of concern that we're hearing about that. And not looking at all at the zero emission equipment deployment and not having any targets here. And what we've looked at is that the ports and industry did ask, hey, infrastructure should be the first focus. It is a very large effort. And so what we've been saying is that this is really an incremental step. It's an important first step of an increment of progress, but there's going to have to be follow-up steps, but it might not be us taking the lead right away. It could be EPA, could be CARB, could be IMO, could be a whole bunch of entities, it might be all of the above. We might have a role in a second step as well, or subsequent steps as well. But we want to get this first step done. This first step has value on its own to help address the infrastructure needed to get emission reductions, to mitigate the emissions from these facilities. What we've also heard is really wanting to make sure that there's transparency and accountability. We've tried to build that accountability into the rule, first as a rule, and second with the reporting that's here, and wanting to make sure that reports that come to us are going to be publicly available, digestible by the public, so that the public has faith and can trust that these actions are going to occur and are occurring. Next slide. From industry, we've heard pretty consistent feedback that they don't like a rule. They want a non-regulatory approach, an agreement, and a one-time infrastructure agreement. Concerned really about what is phase two. If this is an incremental approach, well, what comes next? And there's a lot of concern that, the next step is going to be a cargo cap. And we've said we have no interest in doing anything like a cargo cap. We've been very clear with that. And that's not anything close to what's in this current proposal. This current proposal really is focused on infrastructure. There are questions also about our regulatory authority as well. We have also heard, other feedback at the working group meeting from World Shipping Council. And we've heard this in private conversations with some industry stakeholders as well, that there really is an importance on getting the infrastructure in place, in particular for alternative marine fuels. IMO has some goals and some targets. They're continuing to do policy work in that space, including this spring. And alternative marine fuels need to be made available. So where are they going to be? So there's really good work that is needed here to get these in place. The port complex here is the largest container complex in the Western Hemisphere. So, it makes sense that there is work here to look at alternative marine fuels. Next slide. So we're definitely going to be continuing stakeholder engagement. There will be additional working group meetings. We'll be announcing those relatively soon. Individual follow-up as well. We do plan to do some community workshops a little bit later on. Of course, there will be, additional drafts of the rule language, staff report, a draft staff report, opportunities to comment on all of those. We'll get to public workshops later this spring, and we are aiming for bringing something to the full board for its consideration in August. We'll also, of course, be coming back to committee before then as well. With that, I'll conclude my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Very helpful, comprehensive presentation. I see we've been joined by Councilwoman Rahman. Thank you. I see you. Great to see you. If the committee is okay with it, I'd love to hear public comment before we provide our comments. Is that okay with members of the committee?
That's fine with me. Thank you.
That's fine.
Excellent.
That's fine with me. We have 3 speakers here.
Okay, Mayor McCallum, why don't we start with you, with your speakers there in the.
Okay. First up, we have Jennifer Cardenas.
Members, my name is Jennifer Cardenas. I'm with the Sierra Club. I want to thank you for your time today. I really have been joining all of these meetings. Thank you to AQMD staff for creating this presentation. But one of the things that a lot of the communities have continued to ask is that by not including an emission reduction requirements, how are we going to know our air quality is getting better? The reality is that in Los Angeles, we've had 107 bad air quality days. Kids are in school only 180 of those days. That means that for 107 of those days while they were in school, they were experiencing this bad air quality. What we need is a strong port ISR. We need these rules and regulations so that we can have accountability. It's been almost 20 years since the ports had the opportunity to make a difference. And now that we're pushing for a port ISR, it sounds like they're trying to now make things happen. I think we cannot wait any longer. We cannot allow communities to suffer, for children to suffer in these communities. We need a strong port ISR. And I hope with all the information that your staff members have provided, you're going to ensure that we can protect communities. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Jennifer. Next, Urali.
Hello, everyone. My name is Yareli Olazabal. I am a longtime resident of the Inland Empire and South Coast Basin. I stand before you today to urge AQMD to implement a strong port ISR. We must do better. Ports must be held accountable and emission reduction targets must be implemented. As Jennifer stated, we need a set plan to know that this is actually going to happen. Empty promises are not enough. It's time we prioritize people over profits, implement actual emission reduction targets, and do right by our community. The health of both our environment and community members depend on it. We cannot accept any excuses from the ports any longer. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for your comments. Whitney, Amaya.
Good morning. My name is Whitney Amaya. I'm a community member with Eastern Communities for Environmental Justice and a resident of West Long Beach. We've been here many times before. I don't necessarily need to restate why we're here, but I do want to remind you of what your role is, and that is to protect the residents in your jurisdiction and improve air quality in the region. And so when we're looking at what's proposed in this rule, there's a huge missed opportunity. And what your role is supposed to be, like, it's not coming through in the plan, right? Your expertise is in air quality monitoring. Your expertise is in reducing pollution in the region. And how are we in this rule trying to create a plan without actually talking about emission reductions? We can have the ports develop these plans, and the ports have developed various plans in the past, but we're still suffering from increased emissions. Yes, since 2005, the ports like to say that emission reductions have decreased, but that's over 20 years ago, right? We still need to tackle the emissions that are remaining. And so if we're creating these plans have to set emission reduction targets, and we have to track that progress. And so if we're creating this plan, it's not a guarantee that emission reductions will reduce. If they're making investments in zero emissions, but also continuing to make investments in fossil fuels, emission reductions may increase, or emissions might increase, right? And so we really need you to hold true to what the role of this agency is and focus on reducing the pollution. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Madam Vice Chair, that is all the public comment we have here in person.
Thank you very much. Let me check with Councilmember Rahman. Do you have anyone there in person?
Nobody here at City Hall. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem Rodriguez, anyone there in person?
No, not this morning. Thank you, Supervisor.
Thank you. I have no one here. So staff, are there any members on the phone that you'll be managing for us?
Yes, there are several that want to speak. Would staff like to call those names?
Sure. Fernando Gaitan.
Fernando Gaitan with Earth Justice. Thank you, Vice Chair Mitchell and members of the committee. We're at a critical moment. For nearly 2 decades, frontline communities have endured harmful effects of port pollution while voluntary measures have fallen short. The 2022 AQMD makes it clear that we need to achieve, are required to get about 67% reduction in NOx, and the ports remain the largest source of NOx pollution in our region. This board made the right choice about 2 years ago by pivoting to rulemaking. And now we have a real opportunity to deliver a strong, enforceable rule that communities really need. But emissions reduction targets have to be a part of this. Federal rollbacks on clean air policies have left a void, and making local leadership more important than ever. The good news is that this agency has the power to ensure that reductions actually happen through Rule 2304. You've just heard critics of this rule are questioning this agency's authority to do anything on infrastructure, really. They're essentially saying, stay in your lane. So the district should do just that and regulate air pollution. The ports have certainly tried setting emission reductions of their own. They understand emission reduction targets. Some of them they met, some of them they haven't. But these targets were set with a baseline from before there were any regulations that have resulted in significant emission reductions. So that's where this agency comes in. Now is the time for this agency to help ensure new targets are met, ones that we actually need today to meet the challenges of today. The 2304 should include clear enforceable requirements, ensure that real reductions from pollution happen, not just long-term plans for infrastructure. Prioritize frontline communities that continue to bear the greatest burden from this port pollution, and make sure that these targets, these plans for investment in infrastructure actually result in something. We need to get our return on investment here. So we're eager to work closely with the board and the staff to help shape a rule that meets these goals. We recognize the complexity of this rulemaking and stand ready to provide input, engage in working groups, support this process in any way that we can, but we've got to get this rule done this year. We're optimistic about the path forward and confident that this agency will take bold steps necessary to protect public health. The leadership is here, the momentum is here, and now is the time to act. Let's make sure that 2304, the Port ISR rule, ensures it delivers clean air protections to our region, the clean air protections that our region deserves. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Fernando. Our next speaker is Marvin Norman. Marvin?
Yes, good morning, chairs and members of the board and members of the public. Marvin Norman with CCAJ and San Bernardino resident. And I would like to echo the points Fernando just made and the port continues to be one of the biggest sources of pollution. And although the San Bernardino is not a port community and that we're not next to the directly next to the ports like our friends in Wilmington and Long Beach and such, we still get the pollution as it blows out here. I can recall one time I thought there was a forest fire because of how bad the air quality was when the wind shifted one time. And of course, not everything is visible, and so that's why it's important that we have rules with enforceable targets. I know the ports, of course, love to tout how they've lowered emissions over the last few decades, which is good, and so it shows that it is done because we know over the last few decades that the ports have also grown in capacity and stuff. So it's very clear that setting emissions targets is not at all a cap on operations at the port, and in fact we continue to see the port grow, and as other shippers and communities around the world adopt similar regulations and goals and climate goals, it's going to make the port more competitive to be able to tout and that they are continue to have low emissions in our green port as other ports around the world are doing the same. And so it's very important that we continue to this it's a step to be able to identify the infrastructure needed. I certainly agree with staff on that, and I've sat in many of those meetings, and it certainly is going to be a challenge to get the infrastructure. So it's great to get that ironed out, but it needs to lead to more, and we need to set targets on what that more will be, so that we aren't just scattershot, and maybe we'll hit a target, maybe we won't, and see what happens. And communities have waited long enough, and it is in the plans of and in the agreements even that AQMD has in terms of enforcing air quality. So we need to get on and pass the regulations that will actually lead to lower emissions and quantify what those lower emissions will be. Thank you.
Thanks, Marvin. Our next speaker is Jacob Goldberg. Jacob?
Good morning. Jacob Goldberg with the Port of Los Angeles. So the Port of Los Angeles continues to participate in this conversation and looks forward to participating in future opportunities to comment as the process moves along. The draft rule language raises many questions. Together with the Port of Long Beach, and as acknowledged by staff this morning, we just sent a letter with several detailed questions to help us understand the intent and impact of this rule as drafted, and we look forward to staff's responses. The port's goal remains transitioning to zero emissions operations. As articulated by our mayor's office, we support a collaborative effort to deliver zero emissions infrastructure through an enforceable agreement. An enforceable agreement will respect appropriate jurisdictions and authorities. For an arrangement between us to work, we want to be sure it maintains our respective jurisdictions, and any action taken is firmly rooted in the respective authorities that have been given to us as public agencies. Our goals under the Clean Air Action Plan are aggressive, and we want to be sure we can achieve our goals effectively. Our experience in implementing the CAP has taught us that an adaptable and flexible planning framework that encourages collaboration is critical to navigating constantly changing circumstances and share it to get to our shared goals. We urge and encourage the recognition of the need for rapid adaptation and adding unnecessary complexity or delays. Finally, we will continue to stress the importance of continued collaboration. Our ability to achieve collaboration among multiple stakeholders is critical to developing and implementing any plan, as well as pursuing the funding necessary to execute said plan. We strongly urge this committee not to close the door on alternative approaches that the ports and other stakeholders believe can deliver our shared goals for zero emissions and cleaner air, faster, more reliably, and more effectively than a rule. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Heather Tomley. Heather?
Good morning. I'm Heather Tomley with Port of Long Beach. Thank you to staff for this informational update today and to the committee for the opportunity to continue to engage in this process. We've been reviewing the proposed rule language and considering the implications of the approach since it was released last month. In addition to this update today, we also participated in the working group meeting at AQMD offices a few weeks ago. We appreciate everything the board members and staff have done to assert that this proposed rule does not impose a cap on cargo or emissions. However, we still have a lot of questions and concerns. Related to that, the two ports submitted a letter to AQMD staff late yesterday, which was referenced, to convey our initial set of questions and points where further clarification would be helpful to better understand and to be able to further evaluate and weigh in on the proposed language and approach. We all share the goal of transitioning to zero-emission port operations and cleaning the air, and we agree infrastructure planning is a critical step. But this is a very complex issue, and a rule approach is rigid. We need to make sure we aren't just introducing more cumbersome procedures, complications, and risk factors that won't get us any closer to where we want to be and that may have the opposite effect on what we're trying to do. We also need to ensure that the approach we pursue fosters trust with necessary partners that are essential to success. The challenges ahead of us are many, and what we need is collective problem solving and collaboration to work through the challenges. We'd hoped we were heading in that direction late last year during our technical discussions with AQMD staff before the further meetings were canceled and they announced that we'd be pursuing this rule. We will continue to participate in this process, and at the same time, we'll continue the work that we're doing in the port in cooperation with the operators to demonstrate technologies, plan for and install infrastructure, and deploy clean equipment in pursuit of our zero-emission goals. Emissions at the ports have reduced more than 90% for DPM and more than 70% for NOx over the past 20 years. And this isn't just in the past. Comparing the latest port inventories to the previous year, DPM is down 20% and NOx emissions are down 25% year over year. I'd also like to flag the pie chart presented on slide 2 that labels up to 20% of the NOx emissions in the basin is coming from port sources. This is misleading because it includes more than just the ports of Long Beach and LA. 2023 Port of Long Beach emissions inventory that AQMD technical staff participated in identified port-related NOx emissions from all sources to be 4.4% of the basin's NOx emissions. With Port of LA's inventory, that's combined to be less than 10%. We think it's important to clarify this and be clear about what the data is stating. Again, I appreciate the opportunity to share these comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Heather. Our next speaker is Clyde F.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm not Clyde, I'm Diane. My name is Diane Petrich Flowers. Good morning. I was born and raised in San Pedro, where most of my family, friends, and neighbors worked in the port, my whole community. I love this port. It's my home, it's my heart. Port workers are my family, they are my community. And I'm here, I'm demanding, not asking, for a port's rule that requires significant, enforceable emissions reductions. I repeat, emissions reductions. I've spent most of my life in port communities in the MATES 4 and MATES 5 categories, the worst for my health outcomes. Old San Pedro, West and East Wilmington, North Long Beach, the 710 freeway, with its thousands of port truck trips. Why am I here? 2 reasons. First, I'm here for our port communities, where for decades we have put ourselves at risk just by inhaling, and we can't quit doing that. And second, I'm here for our precious planet, which is suffering and it's on fire. And some of us have friends that got burnt up, right? Very recently. I'm fighting for my grandchildren to have a long life. They live thousands of miles away, but they're affected by what we're doing today. They're affected by what we do here because our ports are a major source of pollution that affects our whole planet, not just our communities here. And this comes back to us as fires and droughts and floods. You here at the AQMD have the authority to eliminate these dangers that we face, the dangers we face here in our communities and far away around the globe. You must follow your mission. You must put us in compliance. What was it? 60 tons by 2037. Let's make a rule that is going to make that happen. Defend our communities and our planet. Stand up for life, not for big business. Make a strong ports rule. that guarantees emission reductions. Thank you.
Thank you, Diane. Our next speaker is Fernando Marquez Duarte.
Hello, everyone. My name is Fernando Marquez Duarte with the People's Collective for Environmental Justice. And as several of the speakers before me, I have been giving public comment for like several times by now. And so I think it is very clear that environmental justice groups, and not only environmental justice groups, but community members in both port communities, but also the Inland Empire, because as Marvin said, we are also affected by that. Everything that comes through the ports gets through the Inland Empire because of all the warehouses that are there. So we require emissions reductions in this rule. You know, the staff presentation shared that they have heard what EJ groups have said, but it doesn't show because they are this so-called rule is just putting forward what the industry says, which is not fair. Then because if public engagement is conducted, then it should incorporate what all the groups are saying specifically, and especially the groups that are most affected by pollution, which are the communities. And I have, mentioned several times of all the negative effects on public health of all these emissions that the ports release. But I think it's important to say it one more time. Specifically NOx and PM 2.5, which are some of the emissions that the ports release that are most harmful. They not only affect respiratory health by generating asthma, but also lung cancer and other respiratory diseases. They also affect cardiovascular health. They foster heart strokes. They also affect or mental health and generate psychiatric diseases like depression, anxiety, but also dementia. So all of these polluting emissions with data of 2022 and 2023, not of 2005 and 2007, like ports used to like to use. They show that this is recent, and that's why we need emissions reduction. So I'm urging everyone here, all board members, please do the right thing and include emissions reductions in this rule. Thank you.
Thank you, Fernando. Our next speaker is Sarah Wiltfong. Sarah?
Hey, good morning. My name is Sarah Wiltfong, and I am here on behalf of the Supply Chain Federation, a national advocacy group dedicated to strengthening America's supply chain by uniting labor and business to protect jobs, invest in infrastructure, and safeguard our economy. I'm here to express our opposition to PR 2304 and instead urge an enforceable agreement. As you all know, the supply chain is fragile. Every added cost or delay has ripple effects on businesses and consumers. No one knows this more than the ports, and as acknowledged in the presentation, the ports of LA and Long Beach have made great and incredible strides in reducing emissions while driving economic growth. And all available evidence shows that this will continue. Continued progress requires a collaboration, flexibility, and gradual adjustments. We stand with our partners in the supply chain to oppose a rule, but instead work with the ports to develop an enforceable agreement that supports both of our economies and the environment. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. Our next speaker is Elisa Coda.
Hi, this is actually Thomas Yelenich with Pacific Merchant Shipping Association using someone else's computer. Thank you, Vice Chair McCallum and committee members for the opportunity to speak this morning. Thank you, staff, for your presentation. Over about 20 years ago, the ports made a commitment with their tenants and customers to reduce emissions, and that commitment has been met and is continuing to be met. We've reduced emissions diesel toxics by over 90%, NOx emissions by over 70%. And how do we know this? The ports every year prepare a comprehensive emissions inventory that catalogs every single piece of cargo handling equipment, every truck trip, every vessel visit, every harbor craft in the port, every locomotive train moving through the port complex. And that results in a detailed emissions inventory that lets us know the progress we're making. And that study is reviewed annually by US EPA, the California Air Resources Board, and AQMD. So it was really disappointing to see that AQMD staff misrepresented the port's contribution to regional emissions. The detailed emissions inventory, which they actually show on slide 3 compared to slide 2, shows the actual emissions of the ports, which is less than half of what they claimed on slide 2. Staff knows this. They participate in the process, and they should have reflected that better in this presentation here today, because it's the progress we're making towards reducing emissions. Ultimately, though, what we're here to talk about is the proposed rule. And, I'd like to second the port's comment letter. It's a detailed comment letter that raises a significant number of questions and goes to the point that I think we've all been speaking about today, that the flexibility that we need to achieve our goals in further reducing emissions and achieving a zero emissions port is best met through an enforceable agreement. So I would ask these committee members to seriously ask staff to revisit the option of an enforceable agreement and move forward with something through collaboration, because it is through collaboration, 20 years of collaboration, that we've achieved the over 90% reduction in toxics, the over 70% reduction in NOx emissions. And it is through collaboration that we will get to our final goals of a zero emissions port. The current direction is the wrong direction. It will not lead to success. We know what success looks like. We've been doing it, and I hope we can return to that path. Thank you.
Madam Chair, Vice Chair, I suggest that we close the queue for online comments.
Sorry, I didn't realize I was muted. Yes, Mayor McCallum, I agree. Please close it, staff.
Very good, thank you. The queue is now closed for any further public comment.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Christian Tapia.
Hi, good morning, AQMD board and staff. My name is Cristian Tapia Delgado. I'm a climate campaigner with Pacific Environment and a downtown Long Beach resident. Thank you to Ian and staff for the presentation. We've heard today and in previous presentations that the ports continue to be major sources of pollution in our region. We know that we need to curb emissions to meet the region's NOx reduction goals and protect public health. And it's unclear what the timeline for doing so looks like under the current rule. The current rule does not seem to set emission reduction targets nor any requirements for the usage of these cleaner technologies that the infrastructure plan would cover. And while we acknowledge that according to the port's cleaner action plans that there have been emission reductions at the ports, the presentation by staff also highlighted that much of these reductions can be attributed to state level regulations and that those reductions aren't necessarily attributed all to the Cleaner Action Plan. The Cleaner Action Plan also uses 2005 as its baseline year, and we know that reductions over the past decade even have slowed down as they can, even though the ports have continued to break century-old records in cargo throughput. So, this can be attributed to some of their own plans, but many of these emission sources, like ocean-going vessels at the ports, continue to be outside of the port's jurisdictions to regulate, which they themselves have stated. So this just raises the need for those in power, like the AQMD, to help us achieve emission reductions from these polluting sources through a port's indirect source rule. So we know that the ports and industry are unhappy about how the rule has moved forward in recent months. Of course, you've heard from our community members that we ourselves are not, happy to see that emission reductions are off the table for now and will be maybe explored at a later phase, but we urge y'all to stay on track. And, we know that phase 2 is like years and years away from now. So we hope that that does not continue to be a deterrent to go back into a voluntary approach. And we hope to see y'all continue moving forward with a strong ports and direct source rule. Thank you.
Thank you, Christian. Our next speaker has dialed in on a phone number ending in 594. You need to unmute yourself. You're still muted. Let's go to the next speaker who had called in earlier but had 33 seconds left.
Hello? Hello, am I being heard?
Hi,
Okay,
Harvey, we hear you.
Good morning. I'm speaking for myself. First of all, there was no agenda, could not be downloaded for this next meeting. So that brings into question the legality. Okay, I want to support that we need an indirect source rule, and that it be solar and this stuff, obfuscation, calling it zero emissions for the last 10 years, whatnot to cover it up, doesn't help. And it has to be done with equity and environmental justice for labor in the community through worker-owned co-ops and franchises, local businesses and controlled, etc. So I just want to say that for now. And it's inspired by CEQA on the socio-economic analysis and under the guidelines for the state CEQA, etc. So that's reported and it's not being addressed here. Thank you. Take care. Bye. Also, as part of the SIP and the FIP plan coming up, there's sanctions and whatnot. They only talked about 27 billion for transportation meeting last month. Everything's on the table. Okay, that's the interpretation that we have working with EPA legal and whatnot. Thank you. Take care. Bye.
Thank you, Harvey. We're going to the last speaker. Her name is Diane, and she has 33 seconds left. And you need to unmute yourself. You're still on mute. I'm sorry we're not able to hear you, but please feel free to submit any comments you like via email, writing, or any other means.
Madam Vice Chair, that's the last of our speakers. Turn it back over to you.
Thank you. And just want to make sure, I help if I put my glasses on. Councilwoman Rahman, no one else has come into your space? Okay, no. All right, excellent. Thank you very much for allowing us to hear from members of the public first. Comments from committee members?
Just very quickly, Madam Chair or Vice Chair,
yes,
no coming to my space either, out here in La Quinta, California.
You have a member of the public there?
No, that's what I'm saying. No one's coming.
Got you. Okay, no one. Okay, okay, excellent. Director Rodriguez.
Yes, good morning. Just a couple of questions for staff. Thank you for the report. I don't expect responses in great detail to all of my questions here from today's report, but I'll go ahead and give it a try here. So first, I didn't hear anything mentioned regarding hydrogen, and curious if staff is also reviewing the infrastructure and supply issues there as well as we move forward on the infrastructure component of this rulemaking process. At the retreat last year, we invited speakers and they expressed the importance of hydrogen in that all electrification to meet our goals, that wouldn't be feasible through electrification alone. And they mentioned very clearly the importance of hydrogen. So one of my first comments is, where does that fall into the discussions, and how does a federal hydrogen hub assist in our goals? So that would be one question I'd like to have us better understand. Infrastructure analysis is prudent. Certainly, I'm appreciative of the the consensus we had at our last governing board meeting to look straightly at that. We need to understand the timing of infrastructure and costs. Do we have, that's the confirmed commitment from CPUC on potential rate increases to accommodate the massive additional capacity needed to attain these electrification goals? Again, I don't expect you to know that answer today, but I really want to know that answer as we're moving through this process. So we're, again, setting up attainable and realistic frameworks and requirements. Also related to electrification, procurement, and supply chain availability of transformers, for instance, that will help deliver electricity to the ports and clean cargo handling equipment. That will inevitably be an issue. It is today. And I'd like to understand more about that and the timing and how flexibility, as you mentioned in the report, will be driven by those type of issues. Do we have a commitment to add these infrastructure needs to SoCal Edison's pending load and their annual forecasts? Specifically to SoCal Edison's involvement, I'd like to have my colleagues consider inviting them to a future mobile source meeting to comment on their perspective on these issues regarding current timing. Some infrastructure, for instance, can take up to 7 years currently to implement. So at a certain point, I think it'll be very important to hear from Southern California Edison directly about these type of forecasts and infrastructure and timing implications. Also, was mentioned during the presentation, I appreciated that, workforce training and these other implications. I'd like to, I know they're involved with the working groups, but at some point, I'd like our consideration by my colleagues to invite labor to a future meeting regarding their perspectives directly on these issues. And then overall, again, I think we need flexibility, as mentioned, collaboration. Our ambition to have as strong of a goal that's reachable, the ambition to do that must be tempered with realistic expectations on the timing of infrastructure availability. Too stringent or lack of feasibility related to infrastructure expectations becomes a situation where we're setting ourselves up for failure, or if it's not realistic, can become an unintentional de facto cargo cap if we're not careful. There was some mention of alternative marine fuel implications. I'd like to understand more and discuss any feasibility gaps in future rulemaking discussions. I'd also appreciate a staff response to the letter submitted yesterday by the ports and a summary response at a future mobile source meeting. Would also appreciate a staff analysis regarding the recent announcements by EPA and implications on this rulemaking for a future meeting. Thank you so much for your consideration. I'll take any comments on what I've just shared, but these are kind of my first sense of where I'll be focusing, and appreciate working with my colleagues on this important matter. Thank you.
Thank you. If I could just ask a clarification point on one of your points, Mayor Pro Tem. I know that the utility companies and labor have been active participants in the working group meeting. And that they've come and provided public comment. So are you asking that they be agendized for this committee, or what's your vision in terms, when you say invite them, tell me what that means. They can come provide public comment, but beyond their participation with the working group meetings, what's your ask?
You know, my ask is at the working group supervisor, I'm appreciative of their being at the table there. I would say it'd be great to hear them directly. Just it's an open invitation, supervisor.
Okay.
I don't think that necessarily needs to be agendized, but I just think it's important to say that, and I know everyone shares that sentiment of encouraging them to attend as well.
Excellent. Thank you. Staff want to respond to Mayor Pro Tem? Question?
Absolutely. So I took a lot of notes. I think some of this is going to have some follow-up as you asked, but I'm just going to go through some of them that you mentioned. So your first question was about hydrogen. And yes, hydrogen is definitely expected to be part of this plan. We have heard from some stakeholders at the ports that they are very interested in hydrogen for certain applications. We expect that would be part of this plan. So yes, it's explicitly included.
So again, we're not looking at solely electrification. I think there's just, when we talk about infrastructure, I think maybe there could be a general perception that that's all we're looking at. And so I just wanted to be clear that when we're looking at infrastructure, supply implications related to hydrogen, that's also part of this overall look at this topic of infrastructure. It includes hydrogen as well. Correct?
You got it exactly correct. It's all of the above on fuels, as far as alternative marine fuels, hydrogen, electricity, all of those that are going to get to that next generation of technologies.
That's even a better way of framing it. All of the above. I'm glad to hear that. Thank you.
Okay. And then you asked about engaging with PUC. I think we'll take that back, but there's engagement that does happen with PUC, Energy Commission, et cetera. So that's something I think we'll have to take back, thinking about any impacts on rates.
Yeah, that's a long-term point. It's just as we're laying out all these ambitious goals, it will certainly shouldn't go into it without understanding clearly what the CPUC view is on that, and the potential the need for a rate increase. So all eyes open on that if we're really gearing towards extremely ambitious infrastructure plan. I would want to know what CPUC has to say about that, at least at some level, before we took up a vote, so we can understand, is it going to be feasible or not. Thank you.
Yep. I think the one other thing I'll mention here on the PUC side and on rates, I think there's pressures that drive rates up, and there's pressures that also drive rates down as there's more electricity sold. Just thinking only about the electricity piece of this, as more electricity is sold, that means that on a per kilowatt hour basis, that the rates could actually come down potentially as there's that fuel switch, but there's pressures up and downs. But definitely we hear your point, and the long-term need there. On the procurement of infrastructure and transformers, et cetera, and the timing needed there, what we're trying to set up with this proposed rule is that we recognize that there's those challenges, and that the ports need to lay out that timing and look at, okay, how long does it actually take, and then set targets appropriately, rather than arbitrarily setting some target year. Look at what's it going to take to actually get there, including things like what you just mentioned. You asked about adding this to SCE's load, as like their load forecasts and what they're planning for. Some of that work is already underway with Port of Long Beach and SCE, as well as with on the LA side, LA and LADWP. So some of that work's already underway. We know in previous conversations with SCE, they're very interested in trying to build that load, additional load into their forecasts, and working that through the various state systems that are state processes that they need to do. So we can continue that conversation.
Just to the supervisor's point on labor a moment ago and clarifying, I would definitely like to invite Southern California Edison to a Mobile Source meeting in the future to talk about their view of the state of affairs and capacity. And as we move along in this, maybe we need to get some more progress on this effort, but I think it'll be really important to understand from them directly what they see on the infrastructure horizon from this effort, how they see this tying into their pending load matters, forecasts, et cetera, and just I would like to hear from them directly at a certain point. So just to clarify that, thanks.
Question, that would include DWP also?
Yes, like I say, utilities. Thank you, Mayor.
I think the next question, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
Okay. You asked about ambition and tempering that with the timing that's needed. And I think, again, to that point, that we're letting the ports set the timelines here, recognizing that we're trying to get to something achievable, and the ports are let's lay that all out. So that's what this plan is setting up. We don't set the targets. wanting to have responses to the port comments at a future meeting, yes, that there will be coming back to committee, and we'll have response to comments and all of this as we go through this process. There's a lot of 80 questions, I think, that they asked, but there's other comment letters as well. So we will be providing responses along the way. And then I think your last question was about recent actions by EPA and CARB waivers, et cetera, and what effects there are on this rule. We do plan to come to board in April with a short discussion on recent EPA actions and sort of overall what it means. Certainly that's going to play into the ports as well.
Thank you.
And I neglected to mention ARCHES on the hydrogen side. We expect ARCHES is definitely going to fold in on any hydrogen planning as well.
Excellent. I think you got more answers I think you thought you were going to get there, Mayor Pro Tem. So thank you, staff, very much for that. Councilwoman Rahman.
I had a quick question here, since I know we've hit up on time for this meeting. I had a question about the draft rule language and requirements for planning targets or milestones, if any. Are there mechanisms in place to make sure that the planning process that we're kicking off with this rule will actually be moving towards greater emissions reductions in the future? Because I think that while I think the questions being asked in the planning process, the inventories of existing infrastructure, the costing out of what is needed, all of that is really important, and I'm really glad that we're doing this, and I think it is it will concretize what we need to be doing in order to take next steps. But how do we ensure that this is actually moving us closer to the goals that we have?
Yes, thank you, Council Member. That's a very good question. I think as we've been going through this transition on zero emissions broadly, one of the things that's really become clear is that there might be goals that are out there on zero emissions and wanting to get there as fast as possible. But without the infrastructure in place, we're stuck. And I think what we're trying to do is get in front of this idea of just planting a flag somewhere and assuming we get there. Instead, let's do the work to see where that flag should be planted. And so this is really trying to make sure that the emission reduction needs that we have, that we can actually get there with these new technologies. What we do expect is that there is going to be some additional analysis that staff is going to be doing if this rule is adopted. For example, if there is targets that are set there by the ports of, well, we're going to assume that whether it's trucks in 2035 or ocean-going vessels will have their own targets, or et cetera, that there's some estimates about what could be the potential emission reductions from that kind of infrastructure if it's used. There could be some staff analysis that we're expecting to do later on once we understand more what those targets are and to see how to get there. But again, this is an incremental approach. It's a first step. I think our agency and other agencies are going to have to continue to take action to make sure those emission reductions, other mechanisms are also put in place to get those emission reductions.
Thank you.
Madam Chair.
Yes. Mayor McCullough.
Thank you very much. I agree. It's critical to have the infrastructure in place if we're going to achieve any emission reductions at all. As a former program manager, there have been goals set by the ports to achieve clean air by certain dates, and presumably they've been planning the infrastructure. What we're saying here is either we don't have visibility into that plan, or we think they're not planning at all, and that we're going to step in through this rule as the master program manager for infrastructure. Is that correct?
I'm not sure how to characterize. Sorry. I'm not sure I would characterize it as the master planner for infrastructure. That's the role of the ports. We're asking the ports to provide that plan to us. We're providing the flexibility within the plan for the ports to make those changes and amendments as it proceeds. The ports have stated themselves that their goal is for zero emissions ports.
Right.
Tell us how they're going to get there. We're not telling them how to do it. We are working with them.
So what we're saying is we don't have a visibility into your plan.
At this point, I would say we do not have the type of visibility that I think everybody would like to see.
Understand, and I don't disagree with you. So how are we going to enforce this, if we get this rule adopted? How do we enforce it?
So the plan would be submitted to us for review and approval. And the plan in of itself then would hold the ports accountable for moving forward. There are mechanisms that would be within this to address changes, deviations that might be necessary for a variety of reasons. But the plan itself would be able to hold them accountable for doing what it is that they said that they would do.
And how, just through the plan itself, we have no enforcement at all?
Well, I think through our normal health and safety code authority, perhaps Barbara can weigh in.
Yes, I think Mr. Nastri pointed out correctly that any violation of a district rule is subject to the normal remedies provided in the health and safety code. That would include not complying with an approved plan, unless, of course, the port makes the case that it needs a modification of that plan due to circumstances beyond their control. And that's written into the rule, that there's the ability to adjust in the event of needs such as that. But if there's no modification made and just simply ignoring the plan, then we do have the normal remedies that we would with any rule.
Would the utilities be involved in this plan at all? Or how are they going to be held accountable, if you will?
I think there's two questions there, two really good ones. So are they going to be involved in the plan? They have to be, right? There's no way to do this kind of plan without including utilities and their processes in it. But that is really between the ports and the tenants and the utilities, and then that gets folded into the plan. But as far as who is the rule applicable to, it is not applicable to the utilities. That's not really authority that we have. Our authority is related to the facilities themselves. And so recognizing that utilities have their own processes and their own timelines, we want that built into the plan. Ports and tenants are working with utilities to develop what is that appropriate timeline. And then if something happens, we recognize it happens all the time with utilities that there's some delay for some reason. Okay, this allows flexibility for that kind of thing.
Yeah. Thank you. I just see us inserting ourselves as the program manager for the infrastructure, and I understand maybe we need to do that, but we need to obviously get the infrastructure in place before we can achieve any emission reductions. And I'm glad to see that we're not putting any of that into this plan at this point.
Thank you, Mayor McCollum. A couple of questions for me, and I'll start where you left off. You know, at the retreat a year ago, and when I consider, and staff talked about a pivot earlier. And so, you know, I walked away from that retreat hearing from everyone that we needed to take a couple steps back because the infrastructure didn't exist for us to go forward. And so, you know, to say that we're inserting ourselves, I don't know. I heard the industry stakeholders, everyone say that that's where we needed to start. And so I did view this as a pivot. Certainly sympathize with members of the community who are unhappy because infrastructure, the pivot, really doesn't directly save lives. I had hoped that we could include some requirements about, how we could report whether or not this infrastructure that everybody said we had to start with was actually being used and how. So we have pivoted from an MOU, to rulemaking. And yet we must not forget, I believe, that we are a regulatory agency. We do have a role to play in this overall conversation. Let me start with a couple of questions. Thank you. I understand from staff that you will provide response to the 80+ questions posed in the letter from the ports last night. Thank you. Given that, are we still on target to staff to have a decision or a rule before the full board by late summer for a vote? Is that your expectation today?
Yes.
Question 2, what happens if the ports don't meet their own goal of, I believe the witness said, or the member of the public, the stakeholder said 100% reduction by 2030. What happens if they don't meet their own goal?
Within the context of the rule, the ports are given the flexibility to change those targets. They would provide a justification under the current rule language. They would provide justification for why a target needs to change, but they have the ability to change those targets. We expect that the ports would be going through their own public process, though. That would be going through their own public process to provide all the good reasons why those changes need to be made. But it wouldn't be I think part of the goal of this is to daylight a lot of this decision-making and to make sure that there's clear understanding from all stakeholders, hey, a target needs to change, maybe for good reason, but it needs to be really clear what is happening. But they have that ability in this proposed rule language.
What's the difference between an enforceable agreement and a rule?
Vice Chair Mitchell, if I could just interrupt, unfortunately, I have to leave the meeting because our council meeting here has begun. Thank you so much for your questions and for this presentation.
Thank you very much. I believe we'll still have quorum, and good luck in your council meeting today.
Thank you. Yeah, if you don't, I can stay, but.
I think we do.
We do.
Staff?
Yes, we still have quorum.
Fantastic.
And we're not voting, we're not taking action, Councilwoman, so thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
So to get to the question of the difference between a rule and an enforceable agreement, first of all, a rule imposes certain requirements that, if not met, are subject to civil penalties and injunctive relief under the Health and Safety Code. And that's the type of enforceability at the local level that we have for a rule. A rule also oftentimes, but not always, is submitted into the state implementation plan for approval by EPA. And if that is granted, then the rule becomes enforceable by EPA and also by citizens in the event that the government agencies are not enforcing the rule. An enforceable agreement, on the other hand, involves a agreement by two parties that each will carry out certain responsibilities that they commit to. If they do not, if one party does not comply with its agreements, normally the method of enforceability would be an action in court for what is called specific performance, which means the court orders the defaulting party to actually implement what they promised to do. In some cases, there are liquidated damages that have been agreed to in advance for a party's failure, but the primary method of settlement would have been the primary method of enforcement of an agreement would be through this specific performance. And that was kind of the issue that the discussions fell apart on because the ports were not supportive of an agreement that would allow that type of enforcement.
Thank you very much for that clear description, because, I heard several stakeholders, acknowledge the fact that it was through, quote, cooperation that we got this far. And I would suggest it's probably closer akin to negotiation that we've gotten this far. And again, if we want to continue to keep our collective foot on the proverbial accelerator, we've got to go further. I really want to thank staff. I know you've been at this for far more years than I have had the privilege of serving on AQMD. And it's evident a lot of time and effort went into it. And I'm clear that we have experienced a pivot, a pretty significant pivot from where we had envisioned in both our 2016 and 2022 AQMPs. But again, I heard a collective "we need infrastructure" cry, and claims that was the bottleneck that was standing in the way of the next generation of progress. So here we stand. I think this rule really bends over backwards to accommodate what we've heard from the industry they needed: adaptability, flexibility. But I would argue that measurable outcomes can't be sacrificed for this desire for flexibility. So I hope that, as the Mayor Pro Tem suggested, that all of the key parties continue to come to the table, to continue to engage in the conversation. It's good to know that we're still on track for August. I'm sure this will be back agendized for future meetings to come as we continue to hear from key stakeholders. And I hope that we ultimately do get to a place where we have a rule in that we are a regulatory agency, and one that gets us to a place where we can ultimately have measurable outcomes for better air quality. With that, I think that everyone has had the opportunity to raise their questions. I thank you for that. We've already called for public comment. And so with that, we'll move on to the next agenda items. Agenda items 2 through 5 are receive and file written reports that don't require presentations. Are there any comments or questions from board members on agenda items 2 through 5? Seeing none, does anyone have any other business for item 6?
Yeah, Madam Chair, if I might just make a point. If we come back in August, that'll be after July, which is we're dark. It might be better to talk about September so that we have a time of reviewing the rule again in August at Mobile Source, rather than coming back at first part of August to adopt a rule when we've been off for a whole month. Just a suggestion.
Well, let me ask staff, how many Mobile Source meetings do we have between now and when we go dark in July?
We have Mobile Source in April, May, June. We were planning to come back in June on ports. So there'll be 3 committees in between now, overall, and August.
I'm vice chair acting in the absence of the chair today, but I would certainly think that we have adequate time, and keeping to the August timeframe is appropriate, but perhaps Chair Delgado can make that final decision when she comes back next month. Moving on to item 7, general public comment.
We have one person with their hand raised, Supervisor.
Thank you.
Harvey?
Hello, am I being heard?
Yes, you are.
Okay, thank you. Good morning. My name's Harvey, and I'm speaking for myself and for the Public Solar Power Coalition. I'm in the public space. Sorry for the noise. Most of the other emissions, NOx and PM, come from mobile sources imposed in this area. At least 30 to 50%. So And the overview is not just capacity to charge this $500 million coming down for climate, etc. But where does the solar come from? Who owns it and controls it? And that's where we come in with public powers, 20% less expensive. We got LA DWP, but there's problems, these fires. We brought this up in place that we have the fires are coming and we have the drought and the winds 80 to 100 miles an hour, and this is not going to stop. It's going to get worse. And we brought this up in the past. We're incorporating bioreference comments we made the last 3 months on Washington Journal on the 6th of January, and on the 7th or 8th of February, and on the 19th. And basically, also incorporating by reference article from Lancet magazine from February of 17 on health and air pollution. And in that, it says there's 1.1 to 1.5 million premature deaths each year in the United States. We're 12% of the population. The state of California uses 7,000 deaths each year from the state total. And that's based on 10 million deaths for the world, based on 50 million worldwide, 20% of the deaths. And does not include heat, does not include drug-resistant antibiotics and tropical diseases increasing and killing a lot of people and other things. Most of the deaths in the world right now are caused by climate. Okay, but these are air pollution and go direct to what's coming. We're taking with these 31 things from EPA and stuff. That's this is real stuff and real cost. And there's problems here that we're talking at $10 million per premature death. A million times a million is $1 trillion. We're talking equal like $15 trillion right here. And it's only part of the picture. It's the tip of the iceberg. And basically, we've incorporated in the stuff we said with Washington Journal that we were overdue for an earthquake. 1857, there was a 8+ earthquake, and it happened in 06 in San Francisco after PG&E put in their gas lines and they burnt to the ground. Okay, this is over 100 years ago. We got to learn from the past, and we got to deal with this now. Anyway, so they have the solar conversion equitable. There's an opportunity to do it now. Also, the insurance commissioner, they did a study with the conference in California. They're kind of hiding. They said there was over $1 trillion in immediate costs, and then past costs, $10 trillion. They don't want insurance to pay for it. The question is, Edison's did insurance company pay for it, or whose? Peter to pay Paul. This is the real.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. This concludes our Mobile Source Committee meeting. The next meeting will be held on Friday, April 18th at 9 a.m. Thank you, committee members.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.
You too.